I was halfway through sorting my duty gear when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. The glowing numbers on the clock read 2:03 a.m. At first, I thought it was a wrong number, or one of those late-night alerts the base sometimes pushed out. But then I saw the name on the screen. Mia. My 14-year-old daughter never called at this hour. My chest tightened as I pressed accept. Mom. Her voice was whisper-thin, like someone had taken all the air out of the room. He is here again. My heart slammed so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. Who? Tell me right now. She hesitated. I could hear her breathing fast, like she was trying not to cry. Uncle Ryan. He is looking for something. I locked the door, but he tried the handle twice, and he keeps walking around the hallway. For a moment, the whole world narrowed to the sound of my child whispering in the dark. My brother, the man my family once called our anchor, the Marine everyone admired, the man who used to lift Mia onto his shoulders at summer barbecues, the same man who had been unraveling for months and pretending everything was fine. I forced my voice steady. Mia, listen to me. If he tries to touch you again, run. Do you hear me? You run and do not look back. Her breath hitched. Again. That word cut into me like a blade. I had not told anyone what happened the last time Ryan grabbed her wrist. He said it was an accident. He said he was trying to stop her from going into my room. I wanted to believe him, but the way Mia recoiled from him afterward told the truth he would not say out loud. I grabbed my keys and shoved my boots on. Tell me exactly where he is, she whispered. In the hallway. He keeps opening my closet. He thinks you left something there. I swallowed hard. I knew exactly what he was looking for. For weeks, Ryan had been circling around the house acting like he had some right to pry into my work and my past. He had asked questions that did not sound like questions a brother should ask. Questions about evidence, about reports, about one particular file he was obsessed with. A file I thought I had hidden well. Apparently, I was wrong. I am coming right now. Stay on the phone. I locked my house behind me and ran to the truck. The December night in Richmond was sharp and bitter, but my hands shook from something colder than winter air. Fear, rage, a sinking dread that this was the moment everything snapped. I hit the highway and pushed past the speed limit. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and black. Mia whispered into the phone. He is standing at my door again. Mom, I think he is angry. Keep talking to me, honey. Do not open the door. Do not answer him. I am almost there. My mind raced through every memory I had of my brother. The way he used to stand at attention during family photos. The medals Mom kept polished in a shadow box. The pride in Dad's voice every time he introduced Ryan as our Marine. But the man who haunted my daughter's hallway tonight was not the same man. Something had shifted in him. Something dark. Something desperate. A month ago, I had caught him in my room searching through drawers. He claimed he was looking for a charger. That lie collapsed the moment I saw the panic in his eyes when he realized I was standing behind him. Tonight, he had come back. Not to talk, not to fix anything. He was hunting for something he thought belonged to him, something I knew could destroy what little remained of our family. I had seen this kind of unraveling in the Air Force. Service members who left the structure of command and lost themselves in the quiet. Some turned into strangers even to the people who loved them. Some made choices that could not be undone. I prayed Ryan was not one of them, but each mile on that highway told me the truth I had been avoiding. He was already gone. Mom, Mia whispered again. He is trying the window. My throat went dry. Do not move. I am 2 minutes away. I promise I am coming. The thought of her alone in that room with him on the other side made something fierce rise inside me. The same instinct I had felt in combat training when everything came down to a single decision. Protect or fail. I would not fail her. The house came into view and I killed the headlights before pulling into the driveway. The place looked peaceful in the dark. Too peaceful. I stepped out as quietly as possible. Mia was still on the phone with me. He is still there, Mom. Please, hurry. I hugged the wall of the house and headed toward her window. Through the glass, I saw a shadow move across the hallway. Broad shoulders, familiar stance. Ryan, my own brother. And in that moment, every part of me broke and hardened at the same time, because I finally understood something I had refused to admit. My daughter was not safe with him. None of us were. And whatever he was searching for tonight was only the beginning of something worse. I whispered into the phone. I am here. I see him. Stay quiet. This ends now. As I slipped into the shadows outside Mia's window that night waiting for Ryan to move away from her door, my mind dragged me backward whether I wanted it to or not. It was impossible to look at the silhouette pacing the hallway and not remember the version of him that used to exist, the one our family once held up like some kind of living trophy. When I was little, Ryan was the safest place I knew. He was 8 years older, tall already, athletic, always carrying me on his back whenever I ran out of breath on our hikes. He taught me how to tie my first pair of boots, how to steady my breathing when I cried after scraping my knees, how to stand still when the world felt loud. Mom used to say he had the heart of a protector, that he was born to serve something bigger than himself. Dad did not say it as softly. He would put a hand on Ryan's shoulder at every family gathering and announce that his son would one day wear a uniform that made the whole Quinn family proud. Ryan liked the praise. I could see it even then, the way his shoulders squared a little too sharply, the way his chin lifted whenever Dad bragged about him. It was as if he was being built into something before he had any idea who he wanted to be. When he enlisted in the Marine Corps at 18, Dad invited half the neighborhood over. They hung a flag in the living room, took photos of Ryan with every relative, even the cousins he barely knew. Mom cried the way mothers do when pride and fear collide inside their chest. I was 10, and I remember thinking my brother was the bravest person alive. He left for boot camp, and he wrote letters back home telling us about the training, the discipline, the brotherhood. His handwriting got sharper, more rigid, as if the Marine Corps had reached inside him and carved out everything soft. But he was still kind then. On his first visit home, he brought me a keychain from the base store and held me tight like he had been missing a piece of himself while he was away. That version of him slowly began to fade after his second deployment. He came home quieter at first. He would sit at the dinner table, but speak only when spoken to. He would stare at the wall behind me when I tried to tell him about school, as if I was talking from another room. At 13, I did not understand what war could do to someone, but I saw the shadows around his eyes and the restlessness in his hands. Mom called it adjustment. Dad called it strength. The truth was neither. Over the years, the changes hardened. He stopped showing up to birthdays. He forgot traditions he once loved. He drank more. He slept less. When he finally left the Marines, he acted like he had been pushed out of his own skin. He could not hold a steady job. He came home with new debts, mixed stories, and shaky promises. Mom covered for him again and again, telling everyone he was just between opportunities. Dad blamed the world for not appreciating Marines. I watched all of this from the sidelines like someone witnessing a slow collapse. The man who once protected me became the man whose footsteps I could recognize from fear alone. At first, I tried to help him. I drove him to appointments. I paid one of his overdue bills without telling him. I even lent him money from my re-enlistment bonus because he said he needed to cover rent. He thanked me with words that sounded sincere, but the next month, he had a new excuse, a new crisis, a new set of demands. The worst part was how he used his uniform to manipulate us. He would stand a certain way, shoulders back, like he was still wearing the insignia. He would speak about honor in a tone that made Mom tear up. He weaponized what he used to be. Over time, he started asking about my work. Not out of curiosity, out of calculation. He always wanted to know where I kept things, what I had access to, who I talked to in the security forces unit. One afternoon last spring, he walked into Mom's kitchen while I was reviewing reports, and he casually asked whether OSI still kept digital copies of seized evidence. He said it like someone asking about the weather. When I stared at him, he laughed it off, but the look in his eyes chilled me. That was the first moment I realized he was not lost. He was choosing a path. One night, a few months before the 2 a.m. call, he came to my house unannounced. He claimed he just wanted to check in, but his eyes kept drifting to my office. That was the night he grabbed Mia's wrist. He said she was going through my room, and he was stopping her, but his grip was too tight, and his explanation was too smooth. She told me later she had seen him going through drawers before he realized she was standing there. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I started connecting pieces I had ignored. The late-night phone calls he would step outside to answer, the messages he deleted, the way he kept circling back to one particular case I had touched during a joint tasking a case involving illegal sales of government equipment. The tape he wanted was not sentimental. It was leverage. He was not trying to fix anything. He was trying to survive something he created. As I crouched beneath Mia's window listening to her shaky breathing through the phone, the weight of every memory hit me at once. The brother I adored, the Marine our parents worshipped, the man who was slowly unraveling into someone I did not recognize. And now, the intruder inside my mother's house, searching for something he believed would save him even if it meant terrifying a 14-year-old girl. I realized then that nostalgia was a dangerous thing because it had kept me blind for too long. The man pacing that hallway was not the man who carried me across creeks or taught me how to be brave. He was the man who turned bravery into a mask, and tonight that mask had finally cracked. By the time I pulled into the driveway of Mom's house in Richmond, every muscle in my body felt like it had been put through a grinder. The windows were dark, the front porch light was off. Everything seemed eerily quiet, too quiet for the chaos I knew was inside. I parked the truck and sat for a moment trying to steady my breath, willing myself to calm down. Mia's voice still echoed in my head. "He's still in the house, Mom. He won't stop looking for it." I had spent the entire drive replaying every conversation I'd had with Ryan in the past few weeks, trying to piece together what he was really after. But nothing had made sense until now. My brother wasn't just losing control. He was hunting for something I had in my possession, something that, if it got into the wrong hands, could bring down more than just his reputation. It was the USB I had hidden in my room, a small device that contained evidence of his illicit activities, the very proof he had been searching for. I knew now that he wasn't after some fleeting need to fix his broken life. No, Ryan wanted this evidence, and he would do whatever it took to get it. The moment I stepped inside the house, I noticed the signs. The front door was slightly ajar, and the faint smell of stale cigarette smoke lingered in the air, an odor I hadn't smelled in years. I turned on the lights, heart pounding in my chest, and immediately noticed that the floorboards near the entryway creaked underfoot. It was the same spot they always creaked when Ryan was here. He never seemed to notice the old house was full of telltale signs. He thought he could sneak around, but I had lived here for too many years not to pick up on the subtle clues. I moved cautiously toward the hallway, listening for any sounds of movement. The silence was almost too much to bear. He had been here recently, probably not more than an hour ago, still searching, still trying to find what I had kept from him. I moved quickly toward the back of the house toward my old room. The door was slightly cracked, just enough for me to slip inside unnoticed. The room hadn't changed much since I left. The faded curtains still hung by the window, and the walls were still lined with the photos of a younger, more innocent time before the family started breaking apart. My eyes darted around the room as I slowly made my way to the dresser. Something felt off. The air was thick with tension, and every instinct in my body told me to move fast. I opened the drawer of my old desk, fingers trembling, and dug through the papers I had left behind. They were scattered everywhere, files, old documents, nothing of real value. But then I found it, the small USB drive hidden beneath a pile of old receipts. I felt a chill run down my spine as I held it in my hand. This was it, the proof. The tape I had recorded from the military investigation into illegal sales of government equipment. The evidence that could destroy my brother's life. And now I knew why he had been so desperate to find it. He didn't just want the tape. He wanted to bury the truth, protect his lies. I had learned that much over the years. Ryan didn't just make mistakes. He buried them, used his position in the military to cover them up. He had used the trust of our family, the respect of his former comrades, to create a shield around himself. And that shield had worked until now. My hands shook as I carefully examined the USB. It was a tiny device, inconspicuous, but it held everything I needed to take Ryan down. Everything I had been collecting since I first noticed the cracks in his story. A part of me wanted to destroy it, to burn it, and pretend none of this had ever happened, but I knew better. I couldn't erase the truth, no matter how much it hurt. My brother was a criminal, and I had the proof in my hands. As I slipped the USB back into my pocket, I felt a weight settle on my shoulders. I wasn't just protecting my family anymore. I was protecting my country. I was protecting the men and women who had trusted Ryan with their lives. He had betrayed them, used his position to feed his own greed. And now I would make sure everyone knew. But as I turned to leave the room, a noise broke my concentration. A floorboard creaked again. My heart leapt into my throat as I realized I wasn't alone. Ryan. He was here. I darted to the door, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My eyes scanned the hallway, the tightness in my chest making it hard to focus. But then I heard the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from the living room. I didn't have much time. I had to leave, had to get out of here before Ryan found me. But my mind raced back to the past few months, to the times he had tried to manipulate me, tried to convince me that everything he did was for the family. And it dawned on me that he had been planning this for a long time. He wasn't just here for the tape. He was here because he knew that if I had it, I would expose everything, and he couldn't afford to let that happen. In the end, this wasn't just about family anymore. It was about power. It was about control. Ryan was trying to hide from the very system he had once believed in, and now he was about to realize that nothing could protect him from the truth. I glanced back one last time before slipping out the back door. My hands still shook, but I knew what I had to do. The truth would come to light whether Ryan liked it or not. I wouldn't let him destroy everything I had worked for, everything we had fought for. He had chosen his path, and now I had to choose mine. I knew the moment I stepped into the kitchen that something was wrong. The house was still and dark, the kind of stillness that felt heavy, unnatural. Normally, when I arrived at Mom's house, there would be sounds of the refrigerator humming or the low murmur of the TV in the next room. But tonight, everything was silent. Even the old clock on the wall ticked slower, as if it knew that something was about to break. I stepped cautiously through the kitchen, my mind racing. Mia's voice echoed in my head again. "Mom, he's here. Please hurry." I tried to steady my breathing, my pulse pounding in my ears. As I walked toward the living room, I could feel the weight of Ryan's presence even before I saw him. He was standing by the window, his back to me, staring out into the night. The faint light from the street lamp outside cast a shadow over his face, making his expression unreadable. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just watched him, trying to steady my thoughts. The man I had once looked up to, the brother I had always trusted, was now a stranger to me. I felt a strange mix of anger and sorrow. How had we come to this? "Ryan," I said quietly, breaking the silence. He didn't turn around. "Harper," he replied flatly, his voice low. "You should have stayed away. This is between you and me, not Mom." I frowned, stepping closer. "What do you want?" I didn't want to show fear, but it was there, lurking beneath my calm exterior. I had seen the way he had been acting, the way he had started to manipulate everyone around him. But I wasn't ready to back down yet. He was my brother. No matter how far he had fallen, I still had to fight for him, for the family. "You know what I want," Ryan said, finally turning to face me. His eyes were dark, almost too dark, like he hadn't slept in days. "The tape, Harper." His words hung in the air like a threat. "I've been patient long enough. Now give it to me." My heart skipped a beat, but I held my ground. "No." His jaw tightened, and I could see the anger flashing behind his eyes. "What are you talking about?" He took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You've been hiding it from me for weeks now, lying to me, playing these games." He stepped closer again, his breath heavy. "It's for the family, Harper. I'm doing this for us." His words made my stomach churn. Family, I thought. You're doing this for yourself, not for anyone else. "No," I repeated, standing firm. "I'm not giving you the tape." I saw the moment his patience snapped. The room seemed to close in around me as Ryan's face hardened. You don't get it, do you? He growled, his voice thick with frustration. This isn't just about you or me. This is about what's right. What's right for this family. If you won't give it to me, I'll take it. The air between us thickened, the tension building like a storm about to break. I had always known Ryan to be hot-headed, but this was different. There was something cold, something calculating in his eyes, and I realized with a sickening jolt that I wasn't just dealing with my brother anymore. I was dealing with someone who would do anything to protect his own skin. I won't let you ruin everything, Harper, he said, stepping forward again, his body now inches from mine. You don't know what you're dealing with. You don't understand the consequences of keeping that tape. His words were venomous, each one carefully chosen to get under my skin. I understand enough, I said, my voice steady but trembling beneath the surface. I understand that you're not the person I thought you were, and I'm not giving you the tape. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I stood tall, refusing to back down. Ryan's hands clenched, his knuckles turning white. You don't know what this could cost us, he spat, his voice rising. You have no idea what you're putting at risk. He took another step forward, his face inches from mine now, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. It wasn't just anger, it was fear. Fear that I was the one standing between him and everything he had worked to protect. Get out of my way, Harper, he said through gritted teeth. Give me the damn tape. I stood there frozen, refusing to move. I couldn't move. Not now. Not when I knew what was at stake. No, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper, but there was power behind it. You're not getting it. His gaze hardened, and for a moment it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. Then with a sudden, violent movement, Ryan reached out, grabbing for my arm. His grip was tight like a vice, and I felt my muscles strain beneath his touch. I jerked back, but his hand held fast. The old instinct kicked in. I twisted my arm, breaking free from his hold. Don't touch me again, I warned, my voice sharp. Not like this. Ryan stepped back, looking at me with a mix of anger and disbelief. You really don't get it, do you? His voice dropped to a low, dangerous tone. You can't stop me, Harper. I'll get what I need one way or another. I stood my ground, not backing down, but I could feel the tremor of uncertainty running through me. I knew Ryan wasn't going to give up, not without a fight, but neither would I. Then you'll have to go through me, I said, my voice steady even as my heart hammered in my chest. I'm not letting you destroy everything. Ryan stared at me for a long, tense moment, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a hint of doubt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold, hard determination I had come to dread. He turned away without another word, his footsteps heavy as he stalked toward the door. This isn't over, Harper, he called over his shoulder. I'll get it one way or another. The door slammed behind him and the sound echoed through the empty house, leaving me standing in the silence. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The confrontation had only just begun, and I knew it was far from over. But I wasn't going to let Ryan win, not this time. The moment the door slammed behind Ryan, the entire house seemed to exhale, but I didn't. My pulse was still hammering, my breath still sharp and unsteady. I had barely taken 2 steps toward the living room when I heard the front door creak again. I turned just in time to see Ryan stepping back inside, his expression darker, harsher, as if something inside him had snapped during the 3 seconds he was outside. Before I could say anything, he crossed the room in 2 long strides and grabbed my arm again, this time harder, his fingers digging into my skin with a grip that wasn't a warning but a demand. Harper! He hissed, his breath hot against my face. Give me the USB. Stop making this harder than it needs to be. I yanked my arm, but he didn't loosen his hold. The pressure burned. Let go of me, I said, forcing my voice steady. Now. His eyes glinted with something unsettling. Desperation, fear, rage. It was all tangled together, twisting inside him like barbed wire. Do you think you're helping anyone by keeping that tape? He snapped. Do you really think dragging our family through the mud is going to fix anything? His grip tightened and pain shot up my arm. You don't understand what you're doing. I glared at him. I understand exactly what I'm doing. He laughed, but it wasn't a laugh, it was a bitter bark that echoed through the empty house. Of course. Major Harper Quinn, always the hero, always the one who thinks she knows better, always the one who has to swoop in and save the day. He spat the words like an accusation. You think you're better than us now. Better than me. Ryan, stop, I said, finally pulling free. My arm throbbed as I stepped back, creating distance between us. You crossed a line, you crossed several lines. This isn't about me thinking I'm better than anyone. This is about what you've done. He shook his head violently. I was cleaning up a mess that never should have existed. I was doing what needed to be done. You stole something that didn't belong to you. You went digging where you shouldn't have. I recorded evidence I corrected sharply, evidence that you were involved in illegal activity, evidence that others are looking for dangerous people. You know that. He stepped closer again, but this time I didn't back up. You're wrong, he growled. I was protecting this family, protecting you. You think I wanted any of this. You think I wanted to deal with those people. You think I wanted to be the one carrying the weight of everyone's mistakes. He jabbed a finger into his chest. I did it because someone had to. I stared at him, stunned by the twisted logic he was now clinging to. If you wanted to protect this family, I said softly but firmly, you wouldn't have lied to us. You wouldn't have dragged Mia into this. You wouldn't have broken into Mom's house. You wouldn't have tried to take something that doesn't belong to you. His jaw clenched. I'm not the villain here. Then stop acting like one. The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I watched his expression shift anger, turning to something raw, something like disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend that I was no longer on his side, as if he couldn't accept that I wasn't a scared little sister anymore. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. You think exposing me is going to fix anything? You think running to your Air Force friends will make this disappear? You have no idea who you're up against. You have no idea what I've been dealing with. Then tell me I shot back. Tell me the truth for once. His mouth opened, then closed again. For a brief moment, I saw the brother I used to know behind his eyes, the one who used to protect me when the world felt too big. But then it was gone, buried beneath the weight of whatever he had gotten himself into. No, he muttered. You don't deserve to know. That was it. That was the moment the last thread snapped. I realized then that there was no version of the truth where Ryan would choose us over himself, no version where he stepped forward, admitted what he did, and faced the consequences. He was too far gone. His ego, his fear, and whatever secrets he was hiding had hollowed him out from the inside. And if I didn't act, he'd drag us all down with him. You need help, I said quietly. And you're not going to get it by threatening me, or Mia, or anyone else. You don't know anything, he spat. You don't know what they'll do. You don't know what I've already stopped. I kept the worst of it away from this family. I took the fall. I carried the responsibility. You committed the crimes, I corrected, my voice sharp. Stop pretending you're some kind of martyr. His face twisted with anger. I did what I had to do, I exhaled shakily. And now I have to do what I have to do. He froze, understanding the meaning behind my words. No, he whispered. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt electrified, charged with years of resentment, betrayal, and unspoken truths. Then Ryan lunged fast, reckless, but I had already anticipated it. I stepped aside, grabbed the back of a chair for balance, and held my ground. He didn't touch me, not this time. He stopped just inches away, breathing hard. This isn't over, he said, voice trembling with fury. You think you're brave now. You think you're doing the right thing. But you have no idea what you've just started. Maybe not, I said. But I'm going to find out. His eyes narrowed. You're going to regret this. Maybe I answered, but not as much as you will. He stared at me for a long, tense moment, then turned and stormed out of the house. I didn't move until I heard the engine of his truck fade down the street. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. I knew what I had to do now. Investigate him myself. follow every lead, pull back every layer of lie he had built, and when I was done, there wouldn't be any secrets left for him to hide behind. The silence in the house was deafening as I sat alone at the kitchen table, the USB drive from the night before still tucked in my pocket. I had not moved for hours, not since Ryan stormed out, and the weight of what I had just set in motion began to settle in. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled the USB from my jacket and inserted it into my laptop. The glow of the screen illuminated the dark corners of the kitchen, casting long shadows over the walls. I had no idea what I was about to find, but I knew I couldn't stop now. The truth was buried in this small, inconspicuous device, and whatever it held would determine the next steps I took. What had once been a simple piece of evidence from a routine investigation had now become my lifeline and my weapon. The file opened, and the first thing that struck me was the sheer number of encrypted files. My heart skipped a beat as I clicked on one labeled Project Phoenix. It had been several months since I last worked on that case, but I remembered the whispers around the office. The name Phoenix had come up during an investigation into illegal military arms deals. We'd uncovered some loose leads about high-ranking officials being involved, but there had been no concrete evidence. Until now. The files in front of me detailed exactly what I had suspected. Ryan had been involved in selling military-grade equipment, radios, encrypted communication systems, and even classified weapons technology to private contractors overseas. The contracts were all hidden under layers of shell companies, making it nearly impossible to trace. But as I dug deeper, it became clear that Ryan had been facilitating the deals, using his reputation as a former Marine, to gain access to high-ranking officials and military resources. My stomach churned as I scrolled through more documents, contracts with forged signatures, dates that lined up with his deployment schedule, and even encrypted messages that looked like they had come from buyers overseas. The pieces were falling into place, and what I was seeing was far worse than I had imagined. My brother was no longer just a man spiraling out of control. He was a key player in a criminal network, one that threatened national security. But as much as the revelation sickened me, I couldn't stop. I needed to understand everything. I opened another file labeled Leverage, and my pulse quickened. Inside was a detailed list of people Ryan had been working with, names of military contractors, ex-soldiers, and even politicians who had turned a blind eye to the illegal operations. But there, at the bottom of the list, was a name I recognized: Colonel David Whitaker. The same man who had mentored Ryan when he first joined the Marines, the same man who had been a close friend of our father. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Ryan hadn't just gone rogue. He had been part of something much larger. This wasn't just about money or addiction. This was about power, influence, and betrayal at the highest levels. Whitaker had been the gatekeeper, the man who had allowed Ryan to gain access to classified military resources. And now it seemed he had been orchestrating these deals from the shadows. I couldn't breathe. The weight of what I was looking at threatened to crush me. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was systemic. My own brother was in bed with some of the most dangerous people I could imagine. I leaned back in my chair, trying to absorb it all. The anger, the confusion, the disbelief, all of it tangled inside me. How could he do this? How could he betray everything we had fought for, the image of Ryan as my protector? The Marine who had once shown me how to be brave seemed like a distant memory. The man I was looking at now was someone entirely different. I couldn't just sit here. I needed answers, and I needed to expose this before it was too late. I grabbed my phone, my hands still shaking, and dialed the only number I knew would help. Agent Cole, the officer I had worked with on the Phoenix investigation, answered on the second ring.
"Harper, what's going on?"
His voice was steady, but I could hear the concern underlying it.
"I need you to listen to me,"
I said, my voice tight with urgency. "I have proof. Ryan is involved in an illegal arms deal network. I need you to help me bring him in." There was a pause on the other end.
"You're sure about this?"
Cole asked.
"I'm looking at the evidence right now. Ryan's been using his position as a former Marine to facilitate these deals, and there's someone higher up involved, Colonel David Whitaker. He's been covering for Ryan all along."
I could hear the sharp intake of breath from Cole. "This is bigger than I thought.
We'll need to get the higher-ups involved, but we can't go in without concrete proof." "I have everything here," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "If we wait too long, they'll cover their tracks. We need to act now." "I'll send a team. Keep your head down, Harper. Don't do anything reckless." The line went dead before I could respond. I looked at the screen, the names, the contracts, the numbers, all of it, a tangled web of lies and betrayal. I had to act fast. I couldn't afford to wait, not when the people responsible for this were still out there, protected by the same system they had manipulated. I had to expose Ryan to make sure he didn't slip away into the darkness like so many others had. I couldn't let him get away with this. Not now. Not ever. I closed my laptop with trembling hands, then stood up, pacing the room. The truth was out. But what I did with it from here would define everything. And I wasn't going to stop until Ryan and everyone else involved was brought to justice. I drove to my mother's house with my pulse pounding and the files from the USB still haunting my mind. As I pulled into the driveway, the porch light flicked on automatically, casting a soft glow over the faded welcome mat Mom refused to replace. This house had always been our emotional battleground, a place where loyalty lived louder than truth. Tonight, it would become something else. When I stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender detergent and old books drifted toward me. Mom was sitting on the couch with her reading glasses perched low on her nose, her knitting needles moving rhythmically. She looked up with that gentle smile that had carried me through childhood storms. But tonight, that smile felt like an obstacle. She sensed something in my face and set her needles down. "Harper, honey, what's wrong?" "You look like you haven't slept in days." I stood there for a long moment, trying to steady myself. Then I sat down across from her. "Mom, we need to talk about Ryan." Her expression tightened immediately, her shoulders straightening. "What about your brother?" Her voice went from warm to wary in seconds. It always did when it came to him. "He broke into the house last night." I began carefully. "He's looking for something dangerous, something I have." Mom waved a hand as if brushing away a gnat. "Ryan would never break in. He probably came by and you misunderstood. You know how you jump to conclusions when you're tired." I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again, the dismissal, the minimization. "Mom, I'm not making this up. I found evidence. Proof that he's involved in something serious. Military equipment, illegal transfers, deals with overseas contractors. I saw the documents myself." Her face twisted not in fear, but in irritation. "Harper, this is your brother we're talking about. A Marine. A man who served this country with honor. He would never do anything like that." I shook my head. "He's not the man you think he is anymore. He's been lying to us. He's been lying to everyone." She stood abruptly, crossing her arms, her mouth pressed into a thin line. It was the stance she took every time she felt cornered. "You always do this," she snapped. "You always go digging for trouble, always looking for something wrong. Ryan has been through enough. He lost friends overseas, he came home different, yes, but he is still my son, your brother, and he needs support, not accusations." "Support?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you call letting him manipulate you? Letting him use the family home as a cover? Letting him steal from us? Letting him threaten Mia?" Mom stiffened at the mention of my daughter. "He would never hurt Mia." "He grabbed her arm last month," I said, my voice trembling. "He tried to force open her backpack because he thought she had something that belonged to him. She was terrified." Mom shook her head violently, her voice cracking. "No, he wouldn't. Ryan is good. He is loyal. He loves this family." I leaned forward, my voice lowering into something cold and uncontrollable. "Mom, loyalty doesn't look like breaking into your house. It doesn't look like lying about money. It doesn't look like selling classified equipment to criminals. It doesn't look like grabbing a 14-year-old girl in the middle of the night because he thinks she has something he wants." Her face went pale, but she still clung to denial like a life raft. "He wouldn't do that to Mia, he just wouldn't." She wasn't defending Ryan anymore. She was defending the version of him she needed him to be. "I saw the files," I said softly. "I saw his name. I saw his signature. I saw the contracts. He's involved Mom. Deeply.
And he's dangerous. Mom sank slowly into the armchair, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. He was always the good one, she whispered. The strong one. Your father said he'd carry the family name with pride. He was supposed to be our hero. He was, I whispered back, but he isn't anymore. We sat in silence for a long moment, her denial battling my truth in the space between us. Then she looked up at me with a hardness I had only seen a few times in my life. If you go to the authorities with this, she said, her voice icy, you will destroy him. You will destroy this family. I took a deep breath because this was the moment I had dreaded, the moment I had known would come. No, Mom, I said. Ryan already destroyed this family. I'm trying to save what's left of it. She flinched as if I had slapped her. Her voice dropped to a whisper so fragile it nearly broke me. He's your brother. I stood up slowly. And Mia is my child, my responsibility, my priority. I won't let him drag her into this. I won't let him hurt her. I won't let him hurt anyone else. Mom's tears finally fell, and she covered her face with her hands. I can't lose him, she cried. You might have to, I said gently, because if I don't stop him, the law will, and the law won't care that he's your son. I walked toward the door. My heart felt like it was splitting open, but my resolve stayed firm. I love you, I said, but I won't stay silent. Not this time. Mom didn't answer. She stayed there small and shaking, clutching the last pieces of a fantasy she could no longer hold together. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I made myself a promise. If I had to choose between protecting a guilty brother or protecting the innocent, I would choose the innocent every single time. Even if it meant walking away from the family I thought I knew. Even if it meant standing alone. Leaving the porch, I knew one thing for certain. The next steps would change everything, and there was no going back. By the time I reached my car and shut the door behind me, the night air in Richmond felt heavier than before. My hands were still trembling from the confrontation with Mom, but beneath the heartbreak was something sharper. Determination. The kind that forms only after you have crossed a line you can never uncross. I pulled out my laptop again, the glow of the screen lighting up the interior of the car. I needed answers. Real answers, not the fragments and suspicions I had been piecing together in the dark. I opened the files from the USB again and forced myself to start at the beginning. The deeper I went, the more the truth began to take shape and the more terrifying it became. There were multiple versions of the same folders, slightly altered names. Identical timestamps mirrored documents with subtle differences. Duplicate recordings, duplicate transaction logs, duplicate classified documents, duplicate everything. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then the realization hit me. Ryan wasn't just trying to get the tape. He was trying to get all of them. He was hunting the copies. He needed the originals gone. He needed the evidence buried so deep that even a military intelligence sweep wouldn't uncover it. He wasn't panicking because I had the tape, he was panicking because he didn't know how many copies existed, which meant there was still something out there that he feared. Something he didn't want anyone to see. I clicked open a folder labeled Correspondence A. It contained message threads between Ryan and several former service members, men he had served with. Men who had been discharged under questionable circumstances. Men who had suddenly gained suspicious income in the past 2 years. And there, highlighted in red, were the initials CW for Colonel Whitaker. But the next thread forced the breath out of my chest. The header read, Phoenix Package Distribution Future Operations. The messages were encrypted but partially translated. They discussed supply routes, buyer negotiations, high-grade communication systems, and drone components. But one line kept pulling my eyes back like a magnet. Ensure the Quinn file remains controlled. If the copy surfaces, operations collapse. My stomach flipped. The Quinn file. They weren't just talking about any classified document. They were talking about me. The file I compiled months ago when I first caught wind of the irregularities in the Phoenix investigation. The one I thought had been buried inside a sealed Air Force database. The one I thought no one, especially Ryan, even knew existed. Except he did.
Not only did he know, but he feared it. Worse, he wasn't acting alone. He had a group of former military contacts helping him track it. Men who owed him favors, men who shared his desperation, men who were using their service histories as shields against suspicion. I read the next message. Quinn cannot know the truth about the transfers. She will escalate. Her record indicates high compliance with reporting misconduct. High compliance. That was code for a problem, a threat, a liability. That was why Ryan came after the USB. That was why he grabbed Mia's backpack weeks ago. He thought I had passed the file to my daughter. The memory burned hot in my chest. Mia's shaking voice, the bruise on her arm, the fear she tried to hide. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. My own brother had turned into someone who saw me not as family, but as a threat to eliminate. And he had dragged innocent people into this men who once served this nation. Men who traded their honor for money and power. Men who hid behind uniforms they no longer deserved to wear. I kept reading, my pulse hammering with every line. One message thread stood out among the rest. It was from Whitaker. Secure all files by the end of Q4. Quinn is not to be underestimated. If she surfaces with documentation, redirect blame to auxiliary sources. Maintain narrative control. Protect key personnel. Narrative control. That was exactly what he had done with Ryan. He had molded him, used him, fed him just enough attention and authority to mask the criminal network underneath. Ryan wasn't just involved. He was a pawn, a dangerous pawn, a willing pawn, but still a pawn. And now that things were unraveling, Whitaker was trying to shift the blame onto Ryan, onto anyone beneath him, even onto me if needed. I swallowed hard. I had seen corruption before in the Air Force. I had testified against officers who abused their power. I had reported misconduct even when it cost me friendships. But I had never imagined that the enemy would be living in my childhood home, eating Thanksgiving dinner with us, hugging my daughter like an uncle should all while planning a cover-up that could dismantle military security operations. And now I knew what the duplicate files were: insurance. Someone inside the network had kept their own copies out of fear or greed. Copies Ryan desperately needed. Copies that, if revealed, would destroy not just the network, but everyone in it, including him. I scrolled to another folder labeled Meetings. The logs listed dates, times, and locations of secret meetups between former service members, places tucked away in South Richmond, Norfolk, Quantico, and even an abandoned warehouse near an old Marine training facility. They were everywhere. They had been hiding in plain sight. The scale of it all made my skin crawl. This wasn't just Ryan trying to hide his involvement in a bad decision. This was a full-blown national security breach. A conspiracy. A betrayal orchestrated by men who once stood for something and now stood only for themselves. My phone buzzed, startling me. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You are putting her at risk." I froze. Her. Mia. They were watching me. They were warning me. Or threatening me. I didn't know which. My blood ran cold, but my mind sharpened. They wanted me scared. They wanted me silent. But after what I had just seen, silence was no longer an option. I closed the laptop slowly, breathing in shaky but steady breaths. Ryan was not just lost. He was dangerous. And he was being controlled by someone far more dangerous. I knew then what had to happen. This wasn't just a family crisis anymore. It was a war, and I had just stepped onto the front line. It was a quiet evening when I pulled into my driveway. The soft hum of my car engine was the only sound as I shut off the ignition and sat for a moment staring at the house that felt increasingly like a trap. I had just come from a meeting with Agent Cole, who had assured me that things were moving forward with Ryan's investigation, but I knew that every day I waited was a day Ryan and his network could cover their tracks. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat and stepped out of the car, locking the door behind me. The evening sky had turned to a deep shadowy blue, and the streetlights cast faint pools of orange along the sidewalk. But as I neared the front door, something felt off. The hair on the back of my neck stood up.
I paused, scanning the area. The porch light flickered, and I glanced to the side. A man was standing by the side of my house near the window. His figure was half hidden in the shadows, but the shape of his stance told me he wasn't there to talk about the weather. I instinctively reached for the taser on my belt, my hand trembling slightly as I did. I couldn't see his face, but I could tell from his posture that he wasn't there for good reasons. I kept walking, staying as calm as I could, but my heart was racing. I knew that at this moment the stakes were higher than ever. As I got closer, the man stepped into the light, and my stomach dropped. He was dressed in plainclothes military-issue tactical pants and a jacket that seemed a little too expensive for casual wear. His posture was rigid, and there was something about his expression that made my skin crawl. "Major Quinn," he asked, his voice low and steady. I stopped a few feet away, scanning him carefully. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. His eyes shifted over me for a moment before he answered. "Special Agent Samuel Larson. I'm with the Department of Defense." My pulse quickened. Another government agent. Another person who seemed to know far too much about my life. "What do you want?" I said, keeping my distance. "I'm here to warn you, Major." "You're in danger," he said, his voice firm but not unfriendly. What kind of danger? I asked, my instincts on high alert. "I can't get into the details right now," he replied. "But your brother Ryan Quinn has been involved in something far bigger than what you've uncovered so far. It's a national security issue." My mind spun as his words sank in. I had already known that Ryan was in deep, but this was on another level. "What exactly are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying that Ryan is directly involved in a criminal network that goes beyond arms trafficking," Larson said, his eyes meeting mine. "He's been working with foreign entities that are tied to organized crime. And there's more, he's become part of a larger scheme that's been operating under the radar for months." I felt a cold chill wash over me as the realization hit. Ryan hadn't just been desperate. He hadn't been a victim of his own mistakes. He had been an active participant in something monstrous, something that had the potential to bring down more than just his life. "Are you telling me this is a military conspiracy?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "I'm telling you that the people involved in this network are higher up than you realize," Larson said, taking a step closer, his voice quiet but urgent. "And Ryan is caught in the middle of it." I clenched my jaw, the anger starting to burn in my chest. "How do you know about me? Why come to me?" I demanded. "Because Larson said," pausing to look me over with a calculating gaze, "Ryan is not just a criminal. He's a liability. And you have the most information on him. We need you to help us bring this network down." My mind was racing. Help them. I had no choice but to help, but I wasn't about to let him manipulate me into being just another pawn. "Why me?" I asked again. "Because Larson said," his voice lowering, "you're the one who can take him down. You've already collected the evidence. You've already seen the bigger picture. And you're the one who's not afraid to expose the truth." The words hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I had already made the decision to expose Ryan, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel so much more real, so much more dangerous. "If I do this, you need to promise me something," I said, my voice steady but full of determination. "You need to make sure my daughter is safe. No more threats, no more games. She's my responsibility now. You want my help? You protect her." Larson nodded, his gaze softening slightly. "I can promise you that. But you need to act fast. Ryan's time is running out, and so is ours. If you don't help us, he could disappear and the whole operation will crumble." I stood there for a moment, weighing my options. The adrenaline was still coursing through me, but a cold, bitter certainty had settled in my bones. I couldn't sit back anymore. I couldn't let Ryan walk away from this. Not when the stakes were this high. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'll help. But I do it on my terms. I need protection for my family. I need full cooperation from you and your team." Larson nodded. "You'll get it. But we need to move quickly. Ryan knows you're onto him, and it's only a matter of time before he comes for you." "Let him come," I said, turning to walk inside the house. "I'll be ready."
As I closed the door behind me, I realized that this wasn't just about my family anymore. It wasn't even about Ryan. This was about something much larger than all of us, something that had been hiding in the shadows for far too long, and I wasn't going to let it stay there. I was going to bring it into the light, one way or another. The morning of the confrontation felt unnaturally still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I sat in my car outside the tiny Richmond cafe where Ryan and I used to grab breakfast before school, before deployments, before life fractured into, before and after. The familiarity of the place felt like a cruel joke now. I checked the time on my phone. 9:02 a.m. He was late. Typical. The last message I sent him, meet me, alone. 9 a.m. Sable Street Cafe had been read within seconds. He knew why I wanted to see him. He knew the truth was closing in, and still he was making me wait. Or maybe he was watching me right now. The thought made my pulse spike. I scanned the street, the parked cars, the alley behind the cafe. My hand hovered near the taser in my bag. Not because he might hurt me though he had come close, but because I no longer knew what version of Ryan would show up. At 9:04 a.m., he stepped out of a dark sedan across the street. Same confident stride, same squared shoulders, same mask of control. But beneath it, I saw the cracks. He looked thinner, his eyes were darker, restless. The kind of look men get when they're trying to outrun both the law and their own conscience. He approached my table on the patio, the morning sunlight slicing across his face. "Harper," he said as if we were meeting for a casual family chat. I didn't stand. "Sit." He raised a brow. "You're giving orders now." "Sit," I repeated. He did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The waitress walked by, asked if we wanted coffee. We both said no at the same time. It made my stomach twist. Old habits. Old reflexes. He leaned forward slightly. "Mom said you stopped by last night. You upset her." Again. I didn't react. "Ryan, I know everything." His expression flickered to the faintest ripple of tension. "Everything is a big word," he said lightly. "You're going to have to be more specific." I reached into my bag and placed the USB drive on the table between us. The sunlight glinted off the metal. His jaw tightened. "Recognize it, I asked." Something cold and sharp sparked in his eyes. "Where did you get that?" "I've had it for months," I said. "It contains the files you and your friends have been scrambling to bury. The contracts, the names, the Phoenix transfers, Colonel Whitaker's involvement, your involvement." He didn't blink, but the muscle in his cheek twitched violently. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know you broke into Mom's house looking for the copy you thought I hid," I said. "I know you grabbed Mia because you thought she had something in her backpack. I know you've been involved in illegal military equipment sales, and I know you're being used as a shield by people who don't care if you live or die." His chair scraped back slightly as he leaned away. "You're reading too much into things again." "Stop!" I said, my voice cracking like a whip. "Stop pretending you're the victim." "Stop pretending you don't know exactly what I'm talking about." His face hardened, a coldness settling over his features. "Whitaker promised me protection," he said quietly. "Promised me a way out. You never understood that. You never understood what it was like to come back from overseas with nothing. No job, no purpose, no future. So you sold out your country?" I asked, my voice rising. "You betrayed everything you once swore to protect. You used Mom. You grabbed my daughter. You think any of that is justified." He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "I did what I had to do." "No," I said, leaning forward, refusing to flinch. "You did what was easy, what was selfish, what was cowardly." His eyes darkened with something primal. "You don't get to talk to me about courage," he hissed. "You with your Air Force commendations and your perfect record. You think you're better than me. You always have." I swallowed hard. "I don't think I'm better. I think I made choices that didn't destroy the people I love." He looked away, jaw clenched. For a moment, he looked almost human again, almost like the brother I used to know. "You don't understand," he murmured. They told me it was harmless. Just resource redistribution. Just equipment that wasn't being used. They told me it was for the greater good. And you believed that I asked. He shook his head slowly. I wanted to. I let the silence sit between us. Then I said softly, "It's over, Ryan. Larson came to see me. Cole is already building the case. You're out of time." His eyes snapped back to mine. "You called the government on me. I had to," I said, "to protect Mia, to protect the people your actions were hurting." He laughed bitterly. "Protect Mia from me? I would never hurt her." "You already did," I whispered. He flinched. He knew exactly what I meant. His hand trembled as he ran it over his face. "I never wanted it to go this far." "But it did," I said. "And now you have a choice. Turn yourself in, or keep running and let them destroy you." His eyes met mine, and for a fleeting second I saw the boy who had held my bike steady when I learned to ride. The teenager who had threatened to beat up my prom date for making me cry. The Marine who had hugged me before deployment and promised he'd come home alive. But the man sitting across from me was not that boy anymore. He inhaled sharply. "I can't turn myself in," he said. "If I do, they'll kill me." "Better the system than the people you're working for," I replied. He stared at me for a long moment, a hollow desperation filling his expression. Then slowly, deliberately he stood. "If I go down," he said, his voice low and trembling, "I'm not going down alone." My blood ran cold. He wasn't threatening me. He was warning me, his final confession. He walked away without looking back. I didn't chase him. I sat there staring at the USB on the table, realizing that the showdown wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The real fight was about to start, one that would drag every family secret, every betrayal, every scar into the light. And I was ready. One way or another, Ryan was going to face justice. The knock came just after dawn, sharp enough to cut through the quiet stillness of the house. I had been awake for hours, pacing the living room with the USB drive clenched in my hand, waiting for the moment everything would tilt. When I opened the door, 2 federal agents stood on the porch. Between them was Agent Larson, his expression grim but resolute. "Major Quinn," he said, "it's time." I stepped aside and let them in. The air felt heavy, as though the walls themselves knew what was coming. "We located Ryan," Larson said. "Your intel from yesterday gave us the final coordinates. He's been hiding in a motel on Route 360. We're moving in now." I nodded slowly. "Are you sure he won't slip away?" Larson's jaw tightened. "We've got eyes on every exit. He won't get far." My chest tightened. A part of me wanted to be there. Another part of me wanted to run and hide from the reality of what was about to happen. "I want to be present," I said quietly. Larson studied me, then gave a small nod. "Suit up and stay behind the perimeter." Minutes later, we were speeding down the highway in a caravan of unmarked vehicles, lights off engines humming in sync like a pack of wolves closing in on prey. My heart beat faster the closer we got. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and muted gold as the sun struggled to rise. When we reached the rundown motel, everything snapped into sharp focus. Agents moved like shadows, silent and efficient. They surrounded the door to room 12. Larson raised his hand and the team froze. "Quinn, stay back," he murmured. I stepped behind the line, my breath shallow. And then, federal agents opened the door. No response. Quinn Larson whispered, "Brace yourself." The battering ram swung once, twice. On the third hit, the door splintered open. Agents rushed inside. There was movement, a shout, a crash, and then, clear. But then another voice. "We got him." They dragged Ryan out seconds later, wrists cuffed, face pale and drawn. He looked nothing like the Marine who once stood tall in uniform, nothing like the brother who used to ruffle my hair and call me kiddo. His eyes scanned the lot until they found me. The betrayal in them sliced through me like a blade. "Harper," he said, his voice cracking. "What did you do?" My throat tightened. "What I had to." He shook his head, disbelief shaking through him like an earthquake. "You chose them over me." "No," I whispered.
I chose the truth. They shoved him into the back of the vehicle, and I watched as the door slammed shut. I didn't breathe until the caravan disappeared down the road. The rest of the day became a blur of interviews, paperwork, security briefings, recordings, and cross-examinations. I handed over every file, every screenshot, every timestamp. By afternoon, I was in a federal conference room surrounded by investigators and brass. I walked them through everything how I found the tape, the encrypted contracts, the duplicate files, the communications between Ryan and Whitaker's network. Every answer felt like reopening a wound. Major Quinn, one official asked, "Are you prepared to testify?" My voice did not shake. Yes, even though the primary suspect is your brother, especially because he is my brother. Hours later, when the sun dipped behind the Capitol dome, they finally let me leave. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. 2 days later, the hearing began. Richmond County Courthouse was packed with press veterans, families, and officials. Word had spread fast, decorated Marine linked to international criminal network. Ryan's military record had once been a badge of honor. Today, it was a weapon the public wielded against him. I slipped into a seat near the back, hood pulled low, hoping no one recognized me. But I wasn't there for them. I was there for the moment. Everything would come to light. When they brought Ryan in shackled, wearing the orange jumpsuit, murmurs rippled across the room like a wave of disbelief. Whispers cut through the air. That can't be him. I served with Quinn. He was solid. They're making an example out of him. Then others I knew something was off. He changed after deployment. Look what greed does. Ryan didn't scan the crowd. He didn't look for me. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The judge entered. Proceedings began. The prosecution spoke first, laying out the evidence. Classified equipment trafficking, conspiracy with foreign contractors, compromised military channels, duplicated encrypted files, patterns of manipulation, use of family assets as cover. Then, Your Honor, we will now introduce a key witness who uncovered the initial evidence leading to this investigation. My breath stilled in my chest. The courtroom doors opened. Agent Larson stepped aside, and they called my name. Major Harper Quinn. A gasp rippled through the room. Ryan's head snapped up. His eyes locked on mine, fury and disbelief swirling in them. I walked to the stand, spine straight, heart pounding hard enough to bruise my ribs. The prosecutor approached. "Major Quinn," she said formally, "is it correct that you provided the initial evidence linking the defendant, your brother, to the Phoenix trafficking scheme?" "Yes." "Did you verify the information personally?" "Yes." "Did you authenticate the duplicated files?" "Yes." "And did you witness the defendant attempting to obtain these files by unlawful means?" My stomach twisted, but my voice did not falter. "Yes." "Can you describe the nature of his attempt?" Ryan leaned forward slightly, desperation flickering in his eyes. I forced myself not to look at him. "He attempted to retrieve the files by intimidation," I said. "By deception. And by force." Gasps erupted. The judge hammered her gavel. Ryan slammed his fist on the table, his voice cracking with rage. "She's lying. She's lying to save herself. They got to her." The judge warned him. He kept shouting until 2 guards restrained him. Watching him struggle felt like watching a ghost claw its way back into a body it no longer belonged to. My body shook, but I kept going. "Ryan changed after his discharge," I said. "He became involved with dangerous people. He used his military connections to access equipment he wasn't authorized to handle. He threatened my daughter because he believed she had something he wanted." Murmurs again. The courtroom felt like it was vibrating. "I didn't want this," I said quietly, but I couldn't stay silent. Not when lives were at risk. Cross-examination was cold surgical. They tried to paint me as biased, emotional, revenge-driven, but the evidence was stronger than their innuendo. When it was over, I stepped down, legs trembling. I didn't look at Ryan. I couldn't bear the mix of hatred and grief etched into his face. After hours of testimony, evidence displays, and witness accounts, the judge issued the final statement. Given the severity of the crimes, the defendant will be held without bail pending further federal prosecution. The gavel struck. The room erupted.
Reporters surged forward, veterans shook their heads, families whispered in horror. Ryan simply stared at the floor, expression empty, defeated. As they led him away, he glanced over his shoulder. Not at the crowd, not at the press, at me. His voice didn't carry, but I read his lips. How could you? My own answer was silent, because I had to. When the doors closed behind him, a strange calm washed over the room. The secrets were out. The lies were exposed. The boy he once was gone forever. And justice, cold, painful, necessary, had finally arrived. This was not victory. This was survival, and it came at a price. The days after the trial felt like a blur. I wasn't sure if it was the weight of the decision I had made or the aftermath of it that left me feeling hollow, like something inside me had shattered, and I couldn't quite piece it back together. Mia and I had returned to the house, but the walls felt different now. They no longer echoed with the laughter and warmth we had once known. Every room felt empty, and even the familiar scent of Mom's lavender candles seemed distant, as though it belonged to a life I no longer recognized. Mia had been quieter than usual. She sat on the couch most of the day, her arms wrapped tightly around a blanket, her eyes distant. I could tell that she was processing it all, the betrayal of her uncle, the police raids, the courtroom, the weight of it all bearing down on a girl who should still have been chasing after ice cream trucks and school dances. But she wasn't. She was carrying the burden of a family torn apart by secrets that shouldn't have existed in the first place. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked, walking into the living room and sitting beside her. Mia glanced up, offering me a small, forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She nodded but didn't speak. The silence between us stretched longer than either of us wanted it to. I had failed her in ways I couldn't undo. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking as I reached for her hand. "I didn't want any of this for you. I didn't want you to see that side of him. I didn't want you to feel scared." Mia shook her head and squeezed my hand. "I'm okay, Mom. Really," she said softly, her voice strained. "But why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you just stop him before it got this bad?" Her question hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I had no answer. I had spent so much time protecting her from the truth, from the lies, from the chaos, that I hadn't realized how much I was keeping from her. I wasn't sure how to explain the depth of the situation, the way Ryan had manipulated not just me, but the entire family. The way he had buried everything under a cloak of military honor, making us believe he was the good guy, the hero. The problem was Mia wasn't a child anymore. She had seen through the cracks. She had known something wasn't right, and I had been too scared to face it, too. Scared to lose the semblance of a family I had once believed in. "I thought I was protecting you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I should have told you sooner. I should have been honest with you from the beginning." Mia looked at me, her eyes wide and searching. "Do you think Ryan is a bad person, Mom?" she asked. The question was simple, but it felt like an impossible one. I think Ryan is lost," I replied slowly, choosing my words carefully. "And sometimes when people get lost, they make choices that hurt the people they love. I don't think he set out to hurt anyone, but that's what happened. He lost his way, and now he has to face the consequences." Mia didn't say anything for a long time. She just sat there staring at the floor before finally standing up. "I'm going to bed," she said, her voice small. "Okay," I replied, standing up too. "Good night, sweetie. I love you." Mia nodded but didn't look back as she left the room. I sat there alone, the silence consuming me. I had done the right thing. I had exposed Ryan. I had brought everything into the light no matter the cost. But why did it feel like I was the one being punished? Why did it feel like I had sacrificed everything? My family, my peace, my innocence, for a truth that couldn't fix what was broken. The truth was that justice didn't come easy. It wasn't like the movies where the bad guy got locked away and the family healed in an instant. It was messy. It was painful, and it didn't always give you the closure you thought you needed. Later that night, I sat in my bedroom staring at the phone in my hands. There was a text from Mom. "I'm sorry, Harper. I just couldn't believe it. I still can't. But I know you did what you thought was right. I just don't know how to fix this." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I don't know either, but maybe we'll figure it out. One day at a time." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't know what I could say to make it better. There was no fixing what Ryan had done. There was no undoing the lies, the deceit, the broken trust. But there was one thing I knew for sure: I had done the right thing. I had chosen to protect Mia, to protect myself, to protect what was left of the truth. And in the end, that was all I could do. The next few days passed in a blur. The media kept a steady eye on the Quinn family scandal, their stories shifting from whispers of Ryan's betrayal to speculation about his motives, his trial, and whether or not he would turn on his accomplices in exchange for a lighter sentence. The air was thick with unanswered questions, but none of them mattered anymore. The truth was out. The consequences would follow. In the quiet moments, I thought about how it used to be, how Ryan used to be. I thought about the family I used to know, the bonds I used to trust, the life I had once imagined we would live. But I also realized something else in the midst of it all. Sometimes the truth doesn't come easy. Sometimes it doesn't make things better or even easier. It just makes them real. And in the end, it's the real things that matter. Mia and I weren't the same people we had been before the trial, before the revelation of Ryan's crimes. But we were stronger. We were survivors. And we were moving forward, one step at a time. I went into the kitchen the next morning and made coffee as usual. The house felt quieter, but not empty. Mia joined me a little later, her hair messy and her eyes still half closed from sleep. She leaned against the counter. "You doing okay?" I asked her. She nodded. "Yeah, I think so." And for the first time since this nightmare started, I allowed myself to believe it. We would be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. The truth had cost us everything we had, but it also gave us everything we needed. The peace we had been seeking was never going to come from hiding the truth. It was only going to come from facing it, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were finally on the path to healing. Justice doesn't come easy, but it always wins in the end, and sometimes that's enough. When I pulled into the driveway, I had to force myself to breathe. The house looked the same as it always had, but it felt different now. It felt foreign. As I stepped out of the car, the weight of everything that had transpired pressed down on me with an almost unbearable force. Ryan was in custody. The evidence had been presented. The truth had been exposed. Justice had been served. But there was no relief, no sense of victory. Only an overwhelming sense of loss. I walked up to the door, slowly feeling the tremble in my legs with every step. Mia had already gone inside, but I stayed outside for a moment, staring at the familiar home we had once shared with all the warmth of family before everything had unraveled. Inside, Mia was sitting at the kitchen table, her school books open in front of her, but she wasn't looking at them. She was lost in her thoughts. "Hey," I said softly as I entered, leaning against the doorframe. She looked up at me, her eyes tired but steady. There was a deep sadness in her gaze, one that I couldn't ignore. "Are you okay?" I asked, though I knew the answer. She shook her head, barely a movement before lowering her eyes again. "I don't know, Mom." I walked over and sat down beside her, pulling her close to me as I did. "It's been a lot, for both of us." She nodded but said nothing. I knew what she was feeling, a mixture of relief and heartbreak, of anger and sadness. She had lost her uncle, someone she had once looked up to, someone she had trusted, and all of it had been ripped away, the innocence shattered in a matter of days. We sat there in silence for a long time. I wasn't sure what else to say, what else could be said. What was done, but the damage still lingered. After a while, Mia stood up and went upstairs to her room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I stayed in the kitchen staring at the counter as if the answers to everything could be found in the cracks of the granite. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from Mom. "I need to see you. Please come over." I read it several times before responding. I wasn't sure I was ready. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But I had to. For Mia. For myself. "I'll be there in an hour." I put my phone down and grabbed my keys, feeling the weight of them in my hand. It felt like I was walking into a battlefield, not a home.
As I drove over to Mom's house, I replayed the last few weeks in my head. The calls from Ryan, the confrontations, the trial, the moments when I thought I couldn't go on, but I had to. For Mia, for the truth, for everything that had been lost along the way. When I arrived, Mom was sitting on the front porch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't look up as I approached, as though she knew I was coming, but couldn't bring herself to face me. I stood there for a moment before speaking. "Mom," I said quietly. She looked up slowly, and I saw the pain in her eyes, the guilt, the grief. "I'm sorry," she said before I could say anything else. "I should have seen the signs. I should have known that something was wrong. I should have protected you. I should have—" Her voice broke, and she looked away, tears streaming down her face. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. How could I? The woman who had raised me, who had always been the cornerstone of our family, had failed to see what Ryan had become. She had failed to see the destruction he had caused, the lies he had woven into every moment of our lives. I couldn't blame her for that, but I couldn't forget it either. "Mom," I said softly, walking over to her. "I don't blame you." She shook her head. "You should. I let him manipulate me. I let him use me. I trusted him when I shouldn't have. I should have seen it, Harper. I should have—" "No," I said, cutting her off. "You trusted your son. You loved him. There's nothing wrong with that." I knelt down in front of her and took her hands in mine. "The only thing you did wrong was ignore the truth for too long. But that's not your fault. It's mine. I should have told you what was happening sooner. I should have warned you about Ryan." Mom didn't look up. She kept her hands in mine, her face twisted with pain. "I wanted to believe in him," she whispered. "I wanted to believe that he was still that boy I raised, the boy who loved his country, his family, the boy who had hope. He was that boy, Mom," I said quietly. "But he's not anymore. The Ryan we knew, the one we loved, he's gone. He's not the same person, but that doesn't mean we can't move forward." She looked at me, her eyes full of tears and regret. "You're right," she whispered. "I just don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to fix what's been broken." I squeezed her hands gently. "You don't have to fix anything, Mom. The only thing you need to do is accept what's happened. Accept that it's over, and learn how to forgive." She looked at me as though I had spoken in another language. "Forgive him?" she asked, shocked. "I can't forgive him for this, not after everything he's done." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my own words. "I'm not asking you to forgive him, Mom. I'm asking you to forgive yourself." She stared at me, confused. "But I let him—" "You didn't let him do anything," I said firmly. "He made his choices. He made his bed. But you don't have to carry the weight of it. You don't have to keep punishing yourself for something you couldn't control." There was a long silence. I didn't expect her to accept it right away. I didn't expect her to suddenly feel at peace with what had happened, but I hoped deep down that it was the first step toward healing. "You'll never be able to change what Ryan did," I said softly, "but you can change how you deal with it. You can choose to move forward, and that's what I'm doing. For Mia, for me, for all of us." Mom's eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was something different in them, something softer. "I'm so sorry, Harper," she said, her voice breaking. "I was wrong. I failed you. I failed Ryan." I shook my head, holding her hands tighter. "No, we're all just trying to make it through. We're all just trying to figure it out." The next few hours were spent talking, really talking about everything that had happened, about Ryan, about trust, about the destruction of our family, and about what came next. It wasn't easy. It was messy, painful, and raw. But by the end of the day, I felt a shift. Not a complete healing, but a step toward it. When I left Mom's house, I realized something. The truth had broken me, and it had broken my family. But it had also given us the chance to rebuild, one piece at a time. As I drove home, I thought about the past, the present, and the future. About everything we had lost, but more importantly, about everything we could still find. We were going to be okay. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But in the end, the truth would always win, because the truth was the only thing left standing.
That night, long after the dishes were washed and the house had gone quiet, I found Mia sitting on the living room floor with her back against the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest, staring at the dark television screen as if it held the answers to every question she had been too afraid to ask. I walked in slowly, not wanting to startle her, and sat beside her with enough distance to give her space, but close enough for her to know I was there. She didn't look at me at first. She just whispered almost too quietly to hear Mom. "I still don't understand. How did Uncle Ryan go from being a hero to all of this? What happened to him?" Her voice trembled with confusion and heartbreak, and it cut straight through me. I took a deep breath before answering because I knew this conversation wasn't just about Ryan. It was about everything we had lost along the way. "I've been asking myself the same thing for years," I said softly. "And the truth is, sometimes people change so slowly that you don't realize what's happening until it's too late." She finally turned her head toward me, her eyes reflecting the weight of everything she'd been carrying. "But he loved you," she said. "He always said you were his favorite person in the world. He used to tell me stories about when you two were little. He didn't sound like someone who could hurt us." I swallowed hard because she was right. The Ryan I had grown up with, the Ryan I had idolized, wasn't the man we faced today. "He did love me," I said. "When we were kids, he was the one who taught me how to ride a bike. He held the back of the seat and told me he wouldn't let go until I was ready. He scared the bullies away at my middle school. He used to sneak cookies into my backpack on tough days. He was always there, always protecting me." I paused, feeling a sudden sting behind my eyes. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Mia leaned her head on her knees. Was it the military? I thought back to the day Ryan returned from his last deployment. He had stood in the doorway, thinner, quieter, his once bright smile replaced with a stiff nod. He hadn't hugged me. He hadn't said much at all. He had gone straight to his room, shutting the door behind him. "Part of it," I said. "When he came back from overseas, he wasn't the same. Something in him had cracked, and he didn't know how to fix it. And instead of asking for help, he tried to fill the cracks with the wrong things. The wrong people, the wrong promises." I let out a slow breath, remembering the first time I noticed he was lying. The excuses, the late-night calls, the borrowed money that was never repaid, the stories that didn't make sense, the anger that flared too quickly. "He thought he had to be strong," I said. "Strong for the family, strong for himself, strong for the world." But the truth was, he was breaking, and he didn't know how to tell anyone. Mia whispered, "Why didn't he tell you? He always talked to you." I shook my head. Sometimes the people who seem strongest are the ones who are hurting the most. He didn't want me to see him fall apart. Maybe he thought I'd look at him differently. Maybe he thought he would disappoint me. Mia was quiet for a long moment before she said, "I just can't believe he hurt us. I keep thinking about that night, when he grabbed me. He wasn't even looking at me, Mom. It was like I wasn't even there, like he didn't know who I was." Her voice cracked and she wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. "It scared me so much." I gently reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. "What happened to you should have never happened," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You didn't deserve that. And it wasn't your fault. He wasn't thinking about you. He was thinking about what he wanted, about what he thought he needed to survive. And he let the worst parts of himself take over." She leaned into me, then her head resting on my shoulder, the tension of the past weeks spilling out of her in quiet, shaky breaths. I wrapped an arm around her and held her close, wishing I could erase her fear, erase her memories, erase the pain that Ryan had carved into both of us. "Mom," she murmured, "do you think he ever loved us? The real him, not the him from the trial." A single tear slipped down my cheek. "Yes," I whispered. "I think the real him loved us deeply, but the version of him that hurt us, that wasn't the brother I knew. That was someone twisted by the choices he made, someone he let himself become." Mia pulled back slightly to look at me. "How do you deal with that?" she asked. "How do you deal with someone you love turning into someone you don't recognize?" I exhaled slowly, my chest tight with the truth I had spent years learning. "You accept that people can break," I said. You accept that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you end up hurting you instead. But you also accept that their choices don't define who you are. They don't control your future. They don't decide your worth. She nodded, taking in my words like she was storing them somewhere deep inside. So, what do we do now? She asked. We heal, I said simply. We let ourselves feel the pain, but we don't let it control us. We talk about it when it hurts. We cry when we need to. We move forward at our own pace. And we remind ourselves that the truth, even when it hurts, is better than living in the dark. Mia hugged her knees tighter. I just miss who he used to be. Me too, I whispered. And then, something inside me shifted, an old memory rising to the surface like a ghost knocking at the door of my heart. I began telling Mia a story about when Ryan and I were little before the world complicated everything. When I was 9, I said Dad took us camping in Shenandoah. Ryan and I hiked to the top of this hill, and I got scared because the trail was steep. He held my hand and said, "Don't look down. Look at me. I'll get you there." And he did. He always got me there. Mia listened quietly, absorbing every word. When he graduated from boot camp, I cried like a baby. I was so proud of him. And when I joined the Air Force, he was the first person to salute me. He said he'd never been prouder. My throat tightened. I hold on to those memories not because they excuse what he did, but because they remind me that people are complicated. They're made of good moments and bad ones, love and pain, choices and consequences. Mia leaned against me again, and I could feel her slowly settling into acceptance, the edges of her grief softening just enough for her to breathe. "Mom," she said after a long pause, "thank you for telling me the truth, even when it hurts." I kissed the top of her head. The truth always hurts less than lies. Remember that. We sat there in silence, mother and daughter, two people carrying the scars of a family broken by betrayal, but not defined by it. I realized then that healing wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 small choices. To face the pain, to speak the truth, to keep moving forward, even when everything in you wants to go back. But there was no going back. Not for me, not for Mia, not for Ryan. What we had now was reality raw, painful, honest, and it was enough to build something new, something stronger, something unbreakable. The truth had destroyed the illusion of our family, but it had also set us free. And as I held my daughter in my arms, I understood something I had never fully grasped before: the truth, no matter how cold, always brings light. And light, slowly, painfully, beautifully, always leads to healing. The days following the trial had blurred into one long, painful stretch of indecision. Part of me wanted to move on, to bury the past and rebuild some semblance of a future. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's face, his desperation, his anger, his betrayal. And no matter how much I wanted to walk away from everything that had happened, I knew I couldn't. I had made a choice. A painful, impossible choice. I had exposed him. I had chosen justice. And now I had to live with the aftermath. But the question that kept me awake at night was, what did justice really look like? Was it enough to see him locked away in a prison cell? Or did I have to take the final step, the one that would sever every last tie between us, between the family we had been and the ghosts that now haunted us? It was an agonizing thought, to let go completely, to strip away the last bit of family I had left. But in the end, I knew it was the only choice, the only way forward. I hadn't seen Ryan since the trial, not once. But that all changed when I received the letter. It came in an envelope stamped with the words, "Federal Detention Center," with his name written in bold block letters across the front. My hands trembled as I opened it, my heart racing. The letter was short, but it hit me harder than I expected. It was from Ryan. He was asking to see me. He wanted to talk. "Harper, I know you've made your decision, but I need you to understand something. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't know what else to do. Please come see me. We need to talk." I didn't know what I was expecting, but that wasn't it. I hadn't anticipated hearing the desperation in his words. I hadn't anticipated the depth of his regret.
Or maybe it was something else. Maybe it was just a last-ditch attempt to manipulate me to make me feel pity for him to turn the tables and make me the villain in this story. I couldn't tell anymore. But one thing was certain: I wasn't going to find peace until I had seen him face to face. I had to know if I had made the right choice. I had to hear it from his mouth. So I agreed. I called the prison and set up a meeting. The day of the visit, my stomach twisted in knots. Part of me wanted to walk away, to not show up, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But I had promised Mia, that I would do this. For us. For our future. When I walked into the sterile, cold visitation room, I barely recognized Ryan. The Marine who had once been proud and confident was gone. In his place was a broken man wearing a prison jumpsuit, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. The once proud military man was now a shadow of himself. When I sat down across from him, our eyes locked. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as though the entire room had fallen silent. The tension between us was palpable. Ryan's hands were clenched in front of him, and I could see the muscles in his jaw working as he tried to hold back the words that were undoubtedly clawing to get out. "Harper," he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know what I did, and I know I can never make it right. But I need you to understand something." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But I was in too deep. I thought I could get out, but the deeper I got, the harder it became to walk away. I got lost, and I didn't know how to find my way back." His voice broke, and for a moment I almost believed him. I almost wanted to reach across the table and hold him, tell him that it was okay, that we could fix this. But I knew better. I had seen the damage he had caused, the lies, the manipulation, the way he had betrayed not only me, but Mia, the entire family. "Ryan," I said softly, "you're right. You can't fix this, and neither can I." He flinched at my words, his face paling. "But I didn't betray you for fun. I didn't hurt you to hurt you. It's just—" He trailed off, and for a moment I saw the old Ryan, the one who had been my brother, my protector. "What?" I asked, my voice tight. "What is it, Ryan?" He looked down at the table, his hands trembling slightly. "I was just trying to protect you," he whispered. My heart dropped into my stomach. "Protect me," I echoed. "You think what you did, betraying me, lying to me, threatening my daughter, was protecting me?" His eyes met mine again, filled with something I couldn't quite read. "If I hadn't done it, they would have come for you. They would have come for Mia. They would have taken everything from us. And you thought you could protect us by getting involved with people like Whitaker," I shot back. "You thought you could protect us by committing treason." Ryan's face twisted with shame, and he lowered his gaze. "I never meant for it to go this far. But I did what I thought I had to do." I took a deep breath, my anger bubbling up, but I pushed it down. "You thought you had to hurt me, to hurt Mia, to hurt this family?" I asked, my voice shaking. "And you think that's justifiable?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of real regret in his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "It's not." The silence between us stretched for a long time. The weight of everything that had happened hung in the air like an anchor. "I'm sorry, Harper," he whispered. "I am. But it's too late now. You've made your decision." "Yes, I have," I said, my voice cold and firm. "And I'm not going to forgive you." His face crumpled, the walls he had built up around himself cracking, but I stood my ground. "I used to believe in you, Ryan," I said, my voice steady, "but you betrayed everything. You betrayed me, and I can't keep carrying that with me." His eyes widened with disbelief, and he leaned forward, almost pleading. "Please, Harper, please. If I'm not caught, I'll protect her. I'll protect Mia." I shook my head, my heart breaking all over again. "If you hadn't been caught, you would have kept running," I said. "You would have kept hiding behind your lies, your manipulation, your betrayal. You can't protect anyone. Not anymore." I stood up, my hands trembling slightly, but my resolve unshaken. "Goodbye, Ryan." His eyes searched mine one last time, full of pain and regret, but I couldn't stay. I walked out of that room without looking back, knowing I had done what I needed to do. I had made the decision. The final decision, and I could live with it. The courthouse was suffocating with tension. The press gathered outside, cameras flashing in the early morning light, their questions trailing off in a jumble of speculation. I stood in the back of the courtroom, watching as the judge entered the gavel, striking down with authority, signaling the start of the trial that had once seemed like an impossible reality. The room was packed. Lawyers shuffled papers. Witnesses murmured under their breath, and there, in the defendant's chair, sat Ryan, my brother, looking nothing like the man I had known. His posture was slouched, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights, but there was a coldness about him now, a detachment that felt almost rehearsed. He had become a stranger, and as I watched him, my heart twisted. Once he had been my hero, my protector. Now he was a shadow of that man, caught in a web of lies and crimes that no amount of family loyalty could erase. It had taken everything I had to testify against him, to stand in front of the court and expose the betrayal that had shattered our family. But now, as I stood in the shadows, I felt the weight of the truth bearing down on me. Ryan had been caught. The evidence was undeniable. He had sold military-grade equipment to foreign contractors. He had manipulated his way into the ranks of corruption, hiding behind his service record to cover up his crimes. And now the world would know. The world would see the man who had once been a decorated Marine, a hero to many, reduced to nothing more than a criminal in the eyes of the law. The prosecution laid out the case with precision, each piece of evidence more damning than the last. The encrypted files, the emails, the meetings he had arranged, the deals made under the table, his involvement in a larger international scheme. It was all there in black and white. But even as the facts were laid bare, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the end of something I had once believed in. The man I had loved as my brother was gone. In his place stood a man who had lost everything: his honor, his integrity, his family. My family. The trial proceeded with testimony from military officials, witnesses from the contractors Ryan had worked with, and law enforcement agents who had tracked his every move. But it wasn't until the moment the final witness spoke that the full extent of Ryan's betrayal hit me like a physical blow. The defense lawyer tried to salvage whatever was left of Ryan's reputation, claiming he had been coerced, that he had been a pawn in a larger game he didn't fully understand. But the witnesses spoke with a quiet certainty, each one confirming what I had already known, that Ryan had made his own choices. He had betrayed not just his country, but the very people who had loved him unconditionally. He had chosen money power and self-preservation over everything else. The final nail in the coffin came when Ryan took the stand. His voice was shaky, at first his words faltering as he tried to explain himself, but it didn't take long for the facade to crack. When asked about the deals he had made, about the lives he had jeopardized for his own gain, Ryan's face hardened. He didn't show remorse. He didn't try to defend himself. He simply looked down at the table as though the weight of his actions was too much to bear. The defense lawyer tried to salvage something, anything. "My client has served his country honorably for years," the lawyer argued. "This was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. He is not the man these charges are making him out to be." But the truth was there in the testimony, in the evidence, in the way Ryan no longer looked me in the eye. And the truth was irrefutable. By the time the verdict was read, I had already made my peace with the decision. "Guilty," the judge said, "on all counts." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I watched as Ryan was led out of the courtroom, his shoulders slumped, his hands shackled behind him. It was a moment I had never imagined would come. The man who had once been my protector, my older brother, the one who had taught me how to fight and how to stand tall, was now just another criminal. His reputation shattered, his future uncertain. As the courtroom emptied, I stood there for a moment longer than I should have, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. I couldn't look at anyone else in the room. I couldn't look at the faces of the reporters who had been taking notes, the families of the victims who had been waiting for justice, the lawyers who had won their cases. I couldn't look at them because I didn't know what I had left to say. What could I say? That I had made the right decision, that exposing Ryan was the right thing to do, that justice had been served. The truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know if I would ever feel at peace with this. But I did know one thing for certain. Justice, no matter how painful, no matter how long it took, would always prevail. It wasn't always easy. It wasn't always pretty, but it was always necessary. I walked out of the courtroom, my heart heavy, my mind full of questions I couldn't answer. As I made my way down the steps, I saw Mia waiting for me by the door. She hadn't come into the courtroom. She hadn't wanted to see Ryan in his final moments of shame. But now, as I walked toward her, I saw something different in her eyes. There was no fear, no anger, just a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. She stepped forward and hugged me tightly. "We did it, Mom," she whispered. "You did it." "No," I said, shaking my head. "We did it." And for the first time since all of this had started, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be hard. The scars would take time to heal. But we had done it, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Justice had won, and it would always win. The weeks after the trial felt strangely quiet, as if the world had finally exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. Mia and I returned to our small house on the outskirts of Richmond, where the familiar creak of the porch steps and the soft hum of the evening cicadas welcomed us home like old friends who had been waiting patiently for our return. The chaos of the courtroom, the shattered pieces of our family, the unspoken grief we carried for the man Ryan used to be, all seemed to linger in the air, but in a way that no longer suffocated us. It was as if we had walked through a storm and were now standing on the edge of calm waters. Slowly, painfully, Mia started to heal. She no longer flinched at sudden noises or checked over her shoulder when walking into a room. She talked more, laughed more, and even started inviting her friends over again, filling the house with the kind of youthful energy that had been missing for months. One evening I heard her talking on the phone in her room, her voice soft and steady. "Mom's trying her best," she said. "We're okay." Hearing those words felt like someone had placed a warm hand over the coldest part of my heart. We were okay, or at least we were learning how to be. I spent more time with my mother too, though it was not easy at first. She had collapsed into herself after Ryan's arrest, spending her days sitting on the porch, staring out at the yard, as though hoping to see some version of him walk toward her. When I visited, she barely spoke, her grief thick and heavy like a fog that refused to lift. One afternoon, I sat beside her on the porch swing, letting the silence settle between us. I waited until the cicadas were louder than my heartbeat before finally speaking. "Mom," I said quietly, "I need you to hear me." She didn't look at me, but she nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I took a deep breath. Everything I did, every step I took, was to protect this family, to protect Mia, to protect you. She blinked, her chin trembling. "He was my son," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "I know," I said softly, "and he was my brother, but the man he became. He wasn't the one who raised us. He wasn't the one who used to read to me on stormy nights. That man is gone, Mom, and we have to grieve him, not the person Ryan turned into." Finally, she turned to me, her eyes filled with tears, her shoulders trembling with years of denial finally breaking apart. "How didn't I see it?" she asked. I took her hand in mine. "Because you loved him, and because sometimes love can blind us to the truth. But now we have a chance to rebuild what's left, together." That day was the beginning of her healing. We didn't fix everything at once, and we both cried more than I expected, but the space between us slowly began to close. And for the first time in years, she let me help her carry the weight she had been holding alone. It was during this period of rebuilding that I found myself reconnecting with my old Air Force friends. One Saturday afternoon, I drove to the base to attend a small gathering organized by some former teammates. As I stepped into the familiar hangar, the smell of jet fuel and metal hit me like a wave of memories. And then I saw them, my old squad, my comrades, standing with smiles that were tired but genuine. Staff Sergeant Lively hugged me first, her arms firm and grounding. "You went through hell," she whispered, "but you came back standing." Barely, I admitted, but her smile told me she saw more strength in me than I felt.
Others gathered around with quiet nods of respect, offering support, not through grand speeches, but through the steady presence only service members truly understood. They didn't ask unnecessary questions. They didn't pry. They knew trauma. They knew war. And they recognized a survivor when they saw one. After the gathering, I sat in my car for a long time, feeling an unexpected sense of clarity wash over me. For months, my life had revolved around exposing Ryan, protecting Mia, and cleaning up the aftermath of a betrayal that had nearly destroyed us. But now, as I stared through the windshield at the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I realized that I didn't want the end of his story to be the defining moment of mine. I wanted more. I wanted purpose. And for the first time in a long while, I knew exactly what that purpose was. 2 weeks later, I reached out to an organization that supported military families dealing with trauma, betrayal, and internal conflict. The director, a retired colonel named Arthur Briggs, invited me to meet with him. "We need people who've lived it," he told me as we sat in his small office filled with dusty plaques and service medals. "People who know what the uniform hides. People who know what families go through when loyalty becomes a weapon instead of a blessing." I nodded, feeling something ignite inside me. "I want to help," I said. "Not just because of what happened to us, but because I know there are others going through the same thing. Others who feel trapped or powerless." A slow smile spread across his face. "Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Joining the organization became a turning point. I found myself speaking with families who had endured pain similar to ours, spouses who had been manipulated children who felt unsafe parents, who didn't know how to rebuild. Every time I shared my story, I felt the pieces of my broken past shift, realigning themselves into something stronger, something that had meaning beyond the pain. Mia attended some of the family events with me. She helped in small ways, guiding younger kids to the crafts table, sharing snacks, offering quiet companionship to children who felt lost. One evening, as we drove home from a support meeting, she looked at me with a maturity that startled me. "Mom," she said softly, "this is what you were meant to do." My throat tightened. "You think so?" She nodded. "You saved us. And now you're helping save other people. Not everyone could do what you did." I squeezed her hand, the warmth of her words settling deep into my bones. "I did it for you," I whispered. "I know," she said, resting her head against my shoulder as we sat in the driveway. "And I'm proud of you." Those 4 words were a balm over wounds I hadn't even known were still open. Over time, our home became a place of peace again. The nightmares faded. The fear loosened its grip. And laughter, real unforced laughter, returned to our kitchen table. Even my mother began visiting more often, bringing home-cooked meals and listening to Mia talk about school or her art projects. She still struggled with her grief, but she was trying, and that was enough. One night, as I sat on the porch watching Mia chase fireflies in the yard, I realized we had made it to the other side of the storm. We weren't the same people we had been before everything fell apart. We were stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected to one another. Rebuilding what had been broken wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But now, with the calm night breeze brushing against my face and the soft glow of porch lights illuminating the path ahead, I understood something important. What breaks us does not have to define us. What destroys us does not have to end us. And sometimes the only way to truly rebuild is to first let everything fall apart. Mia ran back to me breathless and smiling, holding a glowing jar of fireflies. "Look, Mom," she said. I caught the light. I pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "You sure did," I whispered. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I had too. The spring air carried a softness that felt almost foreign after months of tension and emotional upheaval. As Mia and I drove past the rolling fields just outside Fort Lee, I realized how long it had been since I allowed myself to simply breathe without waiting for something to go wrong. The sunlight filtered through the windshield, warm and golden, and Mia leaned her head against the window, quietly humming along to a song on the radio. For the first time since the night everything began, her shoulders weren't tense. Her hands weren't clenched. She looked peaceful, and that alone felt like a miracle. I parked near the old parade ground where I had spent much of my early Air Force career. The trees swayed gently, their leaves rustling in a soothing chorus that carried memories of drill calls, early morning physical training, and long evenings under fluorescent barracks lights. "This place looks different," Mia said, stepping out of the car. "Everything looks smaller than you described." I smiled. "Things always look bigger when you're young and scared." She slipped her hand into mine. "Were you scared back then?" Sometimes, I admitted. "But I learned strength here, too. Not the kind that makes you tough, the kind that makes you honest." She nodded, as if she understood more than her 14 years should allow. We walked slowly across the grass, taking in the faded paint on old buildings, the distant thud of training boots from far across the base, the sound of jets slicing through the sky overhead. "Why did you want to bring me here?" she asked. I paused, collecting my thoughts. "Because this is where I learned that truth matters, that integrity means something. And after everything we've been through," I looked at her, holding her gaze, "I want you to know that standing up for what's right isn't always rewarding. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it breaks you first. But it's still the path worth taking." Mia looked out toward the runway where a C-17 was preparing to land, its engines roaring as it touched down, shaking the ground beneath our feet. "Does it ever stop hurting?" she asked softly. I exhaled slowly. "Not completely, but it gets lighter. And eventually, the weight becomes something you can carry without falling apart." She nodded again, thoughtful. "I think I'm starting to get that." We spent the rest of the morning exploring the base, visiting old hangars I used to work in, watching the young airmen go through routines and tasks that reminded me of who I once was. It was grounding in a way I desperately needed. After lunch at a small on-base cafe, we drove to Quantico, where I had completed specialized training years earlier. The Marine Corps Combat Development Command loomed in the distance as we approached its tall buildings and training grounds, buzzing with the energy of new recruits and seasoned officers alike. Mia stared out at the vast complex. "Did Uncle Ryan ever train here?" she asked quietly. My heart tightened for a moment, but I answered truthfully. "Yes. Long before things changed. He trained hard, fought hard, served hard. He once believed in protecting people. Somewhere along the way, he lost sight of that." Mia looked down at her feet, the gravel shifting beneath her sneaker. "Do you think he was always bad?" "No," I said firmly. "But good people can make terrible choices. And once you go far enough down the wrong path, it becomes harder and harder to turn back." She let that sink in, and I placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "His choices don't define you," I continued. "And they don't define our family. What defines us is how we respond, how we rebuild, how we move forward." Her eyes met mine, full of understanding and a quiet strength I hadn't seen before. "I'm glad we're doing this together," she whispered. We walked through the memorial garden near the chapel, where plaques honored the fallen and the brave. The wind rustled through the trees, creating a sound that felt like a sigh from the earth itself. Mia paused at one of the plaques, reading the inscription silently. "Mom, yes. Do you think justice really matters in the end? I mean, really." I crouched beside her. "It matters because it frees the people who were hurt," I said. "It matters because truth is the only thing strong enough to break the cycle of lies. Justice isn't revenge. Justice is what gives people like us a chance to breathe again." Her hand found mine. "Then I'm glad you fought for it." Emotion tightened my chest. "I fought for you. Every step." She rested her head against my arm, and for a long moment we stayed there, surrounded by the silent names of people who had sacrificed everything for ideals bigger than themselves. By evening, the sky blushed in shades of lavender and coral as we drove to the final place I wanted Mia to see: Fort Monroe, the historic fortress that once protected the Virginia coastline. Its stone walls had withstood centuries of storms, battles, and political shifts, a fortress that had endured, much like us. We walked along the waterfront, the air smelling faintly of salt. "This place feels peaceful," Mia said as the tide lapped gently against the rocks. "It is," I replied. "Peaceful places teach us to breathe again." She watched a flock of birds scatter across the sky, then whispered, "Does this mean we're done running?" I brushed a strand of hair from her face.
Yes, I said softly. We're done running. We're moving forward now. She smiled, small but genuine.
We sat on a bench overlooking the water as the sun dipped below the horizon. Colors shimmered across the bay, dancing like embers of a fading fire.
Mom, she said after a while, do you think we'll ever forget what happened? No, I said honestly. But forgetting isn't the goal. Healing is. And healing doesn't erase the past. It transforms it. She nodded thoughtfully. Like turning something broken into something stronger. Exactly. A quiet settled over us, warm and settling. For the first time, the silence between us felt healed. Whole. When the first stars appeared in the sky, Mia leaned her head on my shoulder. I feel safe, she whispered. My throat tightened. Me too, I said, and I meant it. The ghosts of the past no longer lingered in every shadow. The fear no longer lived in the cracks of our home. We had faced the darkness together. We had fought, survived, rebuilt. And now we were stepping into the future without looking back. As we walked back to the car, I held Mia's hand a little tighter, knowing we were both leaving something behind on that quiet shore. Not the memories, not the lessons, but the weight, the fear, the belief that we had to carry everything alone. As I started the engine, Mia whispered, "Where to next?" I smiled at the open road ahead. "Wherever we want," I said. She leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes with a peaceful sigh. That sounds perfect. And as we drove into the night, leaving the fortress behind, I realized that for the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't terrify me. It called to me. It felt possible. It felt free. Because healing wasn't just about surviving the pain. It was about walking forward together unafraid. If you're still here with me after everything Harper and Mia endured, then you already understand something most people spend a lifetime trying to learn, that justice is rarely easy, rarely fast, and almost never gentle. It demands sacrifice, courage, and the willingness to walk through fire even when everyone else tells you to turn back. And if this story touched you in any way, if it made you remember someone you protected, someone you stood up for, or someone you wish you could have saved, then I want to speak directly to you now. People often talk about justice as if it's a grand thing wrapped in flags, courts, and speeches. But what they forget is that justice almost always begins quietly in kitchens, in hallways, in late-night phone calls where your voice shakes as you whisper truths you're afraid to say out loud. It begins in moments like Harper's. Moments that look small from the outside but feel like the end of the world on the inside. And that is why your voice matters more than you think. Maybe you've lived long enough to know what silence can do to a family, how secrets rot people from the inside, how loyalty, when misplaced, can destroy the very people it was meant to protect. Maybe you've seen someone you love make choices that broke your heart, or maybe you've been the one who had to make the impossible choice, the one that hurt but ultimately saved you. Whatever your story is, I want you to remember this one truth. Harper learned the hard way. Sometimes the smallest act of courage becomes the spark that changes everything. A phone call at 2 a.m., a decision to turn the car around, a refusal to hand over the truth even when the person demanding it shares your blood. And sometimes it begins with something even smaller, sharing a story, reminding someone else that they are not crazy, not alone, not weak for feeling afraid or conflicted. Stories like this one travel farther than we expect. They reach people in places we'll never see. People who need to hear that justice isn't reserved for the powerful. People who need to be reminded that standing up for the truth is still worth doing even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. Harper didn't fight because she was fearless. She fought because she was terrified but refused to let fear make her silent. And maybe, somewhere out there right now, there is someone just like her. Someone sitting in a car gripping the steering wheel. Someone reading a message that shakes them to their core. Someone trying to choose between loyalty and what is right. Someone who needs to hear that justice can still win. Someone who needs to hear you say it. So if you believe even a little that truth still matters, that families can heal, that courage can be found in the darkest nights, I'm asking you to do something small but powerful. Share this story. Not for views, not for numbers, but because people out there need reminders like this. People need to know that justice does not disappear just because the world grows louder. They need to know that there is strength in speaking up. They need to know that one decision truly can change the course of a life. If Harper had stayed silent, everything would have been lost. If she had pretended she didn't see the signs, if she had convinced herself that family loyalty meant covering up wrongdoing, Mia would still be living in fear and Ryan's crimes would still be hidden in the dark. But one choice changed everything. One voice. One refusal. One moment of clarity in the middle of chaos. Maybe your story won't look the same. Maybe your battle will be smaller or larger or quieter or messier. But your courage still counts. Your truth still matters. And you never know whose life you might touch simply by letting this story travel a little farther. If you think justice will always find a way, even through broken families and painful truths and long nights of doubt, then share this with someone you care about. Tell them what you couldn't say yesterday. Tell them you believe in truth. Tell them that healing is possible. Tell them that one small action can change everything. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for each other is shine a light in places where shadows have lived for far too long. And if you're still reading now, it means something inside you understands why stories like this matter. Maybe you've lived through a version of this tale yourself. Maybe you know what it feels like to carry a truth that no one wants to hear. Or maybe you're someone who has watched a family fall apart because no one was brave enough to speak the first honest word. If so, let me tell you this with all the clarity Harper wished someone had told her in the beginning. You are not responsible for the choices that broke you, but you are responsible for the choices that heal you. And healing always starts with truth. Not the polished truth people post online, not the half-truth families tell during holiday dinners, but the raw truth that keeps you awake at night. The truth you whisper to yourself when you finally admit that something has gone terribly wrong. You might think your truth is too small to matter. You might think no one wants to hear it, or worse, that sharing it will make things worse. But silence has never saved anyone. Silence is what allowed Ryan's lies to grow into something too large to contain. Silence is what made Mia afraid in her own home. Silence is what kept Harper's mother blind to the signs of a son who had long abandoned the path he once walked with honor. The world doesn't need more silence. It needs voices like yours, voices that refuse to look away. Voices that will say enough when they see injustice, whether it happens in a courtroom, a living room, or a memory that still stings when you touch it. Maybe your voice won't echo through a courthouse. Maybe your courage will look quieter, holding your ground in a conversation that's long overdue, choosing to walk away from someone who refuses to change, telling someone younger that they deserve safety even when the world tells them to be loyal, or simply sharing this story with someone who needs to remember what courage looks like. You might think that clicking a share button is nothing, but it isn't nothing. It is an act of defiance against silence. It is a ripple, and ripples become waves. Stories passed from person to person build strength, build awareness, build community. Someone who reads or watches this might finally recognize the warning signs in their own home. Someone else might gather the courage to say no the next time someone tries to control them. Someone might even save themselves or someone they love because they finally see what they've been trying not to see. You never know how far your small action might reach. You never know whose life it might touch. And if justice is to keep winning in a world where lies spread easily and fear keeps good people quiet, then small actions matter more than ever. Maybe you are someone who has always protected others. Maybe you were the strong one, the steady one, the one who held everything together while your own heart was breaking. If no one has told you this today, let me be the first. You deserve peace. You deserve safety. You deserve rest. And you deserve to know that the courage you carry inside you, no matter how battered or quiet, is still powerful. Stories like Harper's remind us that even the strongest people have moments when they break. But breaking isn't failure. Breaking is the moment before rebuilding. Breaking is the moment before becoming stronger. And when we rebuild, we do it piece by piece, day by day, truth by truth. If you've followed Harper and Mia to this point, then you already understand that healing isn't found in pretending things are fine.
Healing comes from facing the darkness and walking through it anyway. Healing comes from telling someone your story, from letting yourself cry, from forgiving yourself for choices you made in fear, and from choosing to move forward with people who truly make you feel safe. And maybe that's what you needed to hear today. Maybe that's why you're still here. So if you believe that justice is worth fighting for, if you believe that truth still has a place in this world, if you believe that families can heal not because they are perfect, but because someone was brave enough to stop the cycle, then take this story with you. Share it with someone who needs strength. Share it with someone who is hurting. Share it with someone who has forgotten that they are not alone. You never know. Your action might be the one that gives them the courage to leave a dangerous situation. Your voice might be the one that reminds them their pain is real. Your reminder might be the one that helps them see the signs before it's too late. Justice is not just a courtroom word. Justice is a living thing. It grows when people protect each other. It spreads when people tell the truth. It survives through the choices ordinary people make every day. So if you believe justice can still win, then let this story travel. Let it be the small spark that lights someone else's path. And when you're done, go tell someone you love how much they matter. Tell them what you couldn't say before. Because sometimes one small action, one honest moment, one shared story can change everything. And if this one touched you even a little, I hope you'll pass it forward.